Okay, let's see how this all goes. In theory, with latency, we are live. How's everybody doing? I'm Jem Schofield of the C47 Zlotko. Welcome to the chat. Looks like we've got about 10 people here already. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time zone you're in. First thing we always check is, can you see me? And can you hear me? Is it clear? Is the picture okay? Doesn't have to be perfect, but is it okay? And then we can kind of get goings with all of this stuff. So anybody who's in the chat, that can just give me a heads up. Sound and video perfect. All right, Zlotko. So away we go. It is the first of 2 live streams today. This is Wednesday, February 12th, a couple of days from Valentine's Day, a made-up holiday, which also happens to be my wife's birthday. Reginald has a question. I'll get to that in a second. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Number one, another episode of Camera and Flask today at 3 p.m. Pacific time. Ben is off gallivanting in some remote adventurous location doing a project. And so we have a guest co-host. Thanks, Gerald, for the heads up, which is basically a returning guest co-host, Mr. Eric Naso, a good friend, and also of News Shooter, and also does a lot of promo work in the news industry. And we're going to get his perspective on today's topic, which is going to be about camera movement and the tools that we use for those and sort of how they've evolved. And we'll be talking about old school, new school, and all of that kind of equipment. I've been thinking a little bit about the idea of starting a blog on my website, which is just sort of thoughts about industry announcements and equipment and things like that. Let me know if you think that might be interesting. And generally, by the time Friday rolls around, I have some thoughts on things. And I just got a Podcaster Pro from Rode. Did a podcast, which should be dropping in about 3 or 4 weeks with lens rentals, and was thinking, hey, what if every Friday I just did an audio podcast of sort of a recap of my thoughts on the week, and not specifically about what I'm doing in terms of production, but just thoughts having to do with the industry and stuff like that. I don't know. Those are 2 things I'm thinking about. Let me know what your thoughts are on that, and then we can jump right into the chat. Today's show is really about you. So I thought, hey, why don't we just open this up for about an hour to questions that you have about project planning, production, equipment choices, studio build-outs, budgeting, everything in the sort of corporate to small to no crew realm. We're not talking about short or long form narrative, and generally not about commercials and commercial production, or commercials production. But there you go. So I've got the chat up here. I'm going to start to go through that. If you want me to really hone in on a question that you have, then please do what Travis just did, which is an @the_C47. But let's go back to the beginning here. And here we go. I've got a hydro flask with some coffee in it. Nothing else. It's just coffee. That's for Camera and Flask later on. Though I have been known to have a splash of whiskey in a coffee when I'm on vacation and on a day off. Okay, good. So Reginald says, do you think Atomos will ever release a 5-inch Shogun Inferno? I need the Shogun Inferno for my Sony FS7R, but I don't need the 7-inch size. Not sure about that. Really what I want them to do is a 4K Ninja Star that accepts RAW. That would be great. That would be even better for a lot of people, I think, on the market, to have something that's smaller, that doesn't even have a screen that's larger than, let's say, what's on the Rode Wireless Go. That would be enough information. I want confidence that I'm recording. I want to be able to choose my bit rate and my resolution and all of that fun stuff. And I don't necessarily always need that. especially when I'm using cameras with decent quality monitors already on them. So, Mike, good morning. Small Biz Digital Media. Been through Caleb's fabulous XT3 course, but wondering how he gets around the Ninja 5 external recordings, clipping due using 6 video levels when the cameras use 0 through 255. That's a good question, and I don't know the answer, and you're going to have to ask Caleb about that. I'm going to be digging more into the XT3 in the near future, but I tend to, because the recording options in that camera are relatively good, and I've kind of found the sweet spot. I don't find myself going to the Ninja 5, which I have actually right over here. So there you go. So it's hard. I'm usually in a long GOP. I would rather be in all-I, but for some reason, Final Cut likes the long GOP more, which is odd. And I'm at 200 megabits per second, and that's kind of my sweet spot. And I understand why you would go externally, but that's sort of my workflow in terms of stuff. Travis, thoughts on C100 Mark I in 2020, opportunity to get one for $650. Look, it's a no-brainer, Travis. It's a fantastic 4K sensor to 1080 image. I've got one right here above me. I've got one right over there. They still work in my studio. They're still great. You know, the disadvantage is you're not getting AF, obviously. You're not getting some of the new Canon log and gamuts that you're getting. You're not getting 4K. But for $650, if that thing works, do it. All right. I'm doing well, Andres. Hope those lights are working out well. Josh, for a shoot. Again, if you want my attention, if that's cool, then just do a at the C47 like Travis did. But I'm going to go through this. Josh says, for a shoot day of interviews, how much time do you usually allow for setup? As much as I can get, but I would say the average is 30 to 45 minutes. Sometimes it's less than that, but, you know, there you go. And have I seen any of the masterclass courses? Is it worth it? I have, and I think it is. I often watch them just for inspiration from a production standpoint. And I also, of course, want to glean knowledge from some of the best people in the industry. The time to do it is when they do a buy one, get one free, where you basically pay $180 for the year, and then you gift the other year to somebody else. So it winds up being $90 for each of the ones. So I got it for my father this year, but I've had it for the last 2 to 3 years. I don't sit there and watch it every week, and I regret sometimes that I wait towards the end of the year. But I think for the money, especially if you're interested in more than just our industry, it's pretty fascinating because I love cooking. So there's also some great content on that. Okay. Shovik, is that correct? Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Will I be getting a Fuji XT4? I hope so at some point. I use the XT3 all of the time. I'm excited about what that camera could be. Obviously, there's an official announcement of what the specs and everything will be on, depending on where you are on the planet, February 25th / February 26th. So we're not far away from finding out what that camera is going to be. I'm excited about it because, you know, the XT3 really was the camera that brought me back to a hybrid form factor, and it fits me really well in terms of a balance. I also do take stills, and I had an XE2 for a long time. I still have it, and I was thinking about upgrading to XE3, and then when the XT3 came out, and it had the video capabilities it had, it was kind of a no-brainer, even though I wanted a rangefinder-style camera system. So maybe there's an XE4 in my future, if that ever comes out, just for stills. But right now, I'm very happy with what I'm getting with the T3. And the T4 will obviously be an evolution, at least, of that camera system. So we'll see what we get out of that, and more to come in the future as we get some more information. Okay, tips on finding new clients, and then tips for obtaining clients. I guess they're kind of interconnected. I don't know if this is a mind meld and when those were posted. It's a tough one. I mean, we live in a kind of a time right now, though I have to say that in my industry, coronavirus is actually having a dramatic impact in terms of my wheelhouse and what I do. But we're living in a time, at least in the United States, where there is work to be had. And I think the first thing you have to do, which you may have already done, is try to identify the type of work that you would like to be doing. Some people would just like to be doing production and like to be editing, and they don't really care what that content has to do with their interests and their likes. It's just they enjoy doing those things. But I think for most people, when you look at the long game, and I've been in the long game now for 24 years, you have to find out and figure out what it is that you would like to be creating in terms of content for a long period of time. And in the beginning, for me, it was sort of, yeah, I had interest in the music industry. I had interest in travel and food. And luckily, I got a few little jobs related to that. But when I really looked at it, what I was most interested in was creating content around my biggest interest outside of my family and food and cooking, which is this industry, equipment, and also part of it being the teaching component of it. So my long game is creating and producing corporate content for sure, 1,000,000%, and different types of corporate content. And every job that comes along that's a challenge is really exciting to me. But the long game is really creating in-depth educational content in and around what we do. And that's it. So more to come on all of that. But for you, it's figuring out what you would like to create content on. And also, what role would you like to be in the long game? Because some people want to become career DPs or DOPs. And other people really want to move more towards the producer director role. Some people want to be in the corporate realm, which can be very exciting depending on the companies that you're working for. It does not have to be boring to do corporate work. And then other people want to really move in towards the narrative, scripted side of things, which, obviously commercials is a great way to get into that. A lot of people get into that also through music videos, even though they're not necessarily scripted. There is a narrative that is supposed to exist there. And of course, any content we create is supposed to have a narrative, even if it's not traditional scripted narrative content. Story is king. So those are some things. And then you basically have to ideally find like-minded people and get yourself onto local projects that relate to the things that you're interested in. There's no magic formula. Don't let people BS you. I mean, I see these things online. I'm actually thinking about starting to create some content, educational content that's targeted to people who are outside of our industry, people who don't aspire to be video production professionals, filmmakers, so on and so forth. And they have to create and understand how to create video-based content and do it better than other people. And if you think about that, that relates to a lot of people out there, especially in the business world, but they don't aspire. And so I have no interest in telling them, I'm going to help you 3x or 10x or 20x your income if you listen to me and do these things. What I am interested in is helping people learn production more effectively, how to use the tools that they have and the tools that they get to up their production quality, both from a picture and a sound standpoint. So I hope that's an okay answer, and we can continue that conversation. It's sort of never ending. Josh, getting 2 GH5s with Metabones adapters with Canon glass for my new full-time corporate job, getting some Ninja 5s for them. Well, any recommended accessories? I think, Josh, that has to do with your shooting style. We are going to be talking about camera movement and camera movement equipment on the live stream for Camera and Flask at 3 p.m. Pacific today. So myself, Caleb, and Eric Naso. And the link is at the top of this chat. It's figuring out that. I mean, obviously, good quality tripod systems make a big difference, but it really depends on what type of shooter you are. I found that over the years, with all of the gear lust that we suffer from, that it is really easy to just go down the road of buy. And you really have to kind of figure out what type of style of content you're trying to create, because you could buy a gimbal, you could buy a jib, you could buy a slider, and all of those tools are relevant for certain types of content that you're creating. But I would say that, what you really want to be thinking about is good audio solutions if you haven't. And depending on what you're trying to do, things like the Wireless Go are great for quick down and dirty content. And then you may want to get the XLR attachment for the camera, and then that will open up a lot of other opportunities, like 2-channel receivers like the one Sony makes, the UWP and things like that. So you have to decide, are you going to cage this thing or not? I'm sort of a 50-50 on my XT3. Sometimes I just want it out of the cage and I want to keep it simple, and I might put like a little handle on it with a couple of cold shoes with some essentially cheese-plated handle, so I can do some things with that. And then other times I have a small rig cage that goes on there, and it allows me to gack it out a little bit more. But I would say that audio and your basic camera support are your first places to go. Considering cine modding my Mamiya lenses, is there an anamorphic projection lens that can use full image circle of medium format? I have no freaking idea. That's my answer. But if you find out, let me know. Because I'm very interested in Fujifilm's GF series cameras, their medium format. Gerald says, run and gun shooting in a small office. Think I can get away with my 35mm prime, or should I grab my 24 instead? Fast shooting, no time to change lenses. 24 sounds like the right way to go. What camera? What's your sensor size, Gerald? Let me know that. For my Fuji setup, do you use the Fringer adapter? I do not for Canon glass. I have an adapter. It's kind of a no-name one. I mainly don't adapt Canon glass to that. The adapter that I use more than anything else, and not that much, is for my Olympus Zuiko lenses. Daniel, what software subscriptions do you use for business, accounting, marketing, project management? What do we use? That's a good question. Jeff sort of runs that side of the business for the most part. We're using Genius for some stuff for affiliate. We're using, what are we using for accounting? Oh my goodness, I've gone blank on that. I use Squarespace for my website, though I'm thinking about tying some things into there, especially if I start to do the blog and stuff like that. I have templates that I've created for my proposals, but those are all just built in Pages, or they can be built in Word. There's nothing special about those. And I've been looking at this whole ClickFunnels thing. I don't know really how I feel about it. It's pretty interesting. I'm not really an upsell kind of person. So I do look at this stuff, but generally I just find that with everything else that's going on in my life, that I just want to create content consistently, and that's sort of the goal. What car do you tote my gear around in? Josh is asking. I have a Nissan Rogue. Has a little secret compartment underneath, which is great for C-stands and sandbags. It's not big. I do have a trailer as well, though I don't really travel with that. I'd like to kit it out as a grip and electric trailer at some point. I was going to do a whole series on that, but then I decided that this space was more important. So I think we're going to concentrate on the build out of the studio first, and then maybe get to that in the future. Let's see what we got. Trevor mentions to Gerald lights, of course. Yes. And we can talk about that. Let's see what we got. Trevor, in your opinion, why is such quality content coming from Netflix? Are these up-and-comer filmmakers or just displaced people from the existing TV and film industries? Trevor, Netflix, Amazon, Apple, Disney, they have entire divisions of, these companies that are going out there and finding the best production companies that there are. And they're spending a lot of money on the concept of content is king. So I think it's a number of things. Sure, there's going to be some people who come into the mix as up and coming filmmakers, but I think that that's few and far between. This is, without question, the golden age of television, if you want to call it television. And I don't think that we're going to see that slowing down anytime soon. So, it's great for us. It's overwhelming, but we're getting the best content we've ever had access to. And if you want to complain about what's happening in terms of films in general, then you just have to turn to these other places because there's something for almost everyone. And the quality of content is quite exceptional in certain places. Hello, David. Welcome. Stupid question. I like stupid questions. Ever hear why Aputure spells their name that way? No. I have no idea. And I should ask Ted at some point. That's a good question. Maybe I can try to get him drunk one day and ask him. Maybe he doesn't need to be drunk. I don't know. Gerald says full frame Sony. Okay. So that's still depending on the dimensions of the room. I tend to lean towards that 35 because of the bokeh, but if you literally can't even get into the space and do a lens swap to make that decision, then I'd go with the 24. But honestly, you got to have a minute to be able to swap and take a look at your frame, right? I mean, bring them both and then just put one on the camera and leave it there. If you can do that, that's the way I'd go. And that's easy to handle with clients usually. I just need, a second. We're just going to go ahead and decide which lens is best for this location. And even if that takes a minute, they're usually fine. Maybe there's something I don't understand about that though. Do I think, keep doing the at the C47, but Shovik says, tell me if I'm saying that right. Do you think future Fujifilm mirrorless will record raw video like Canon, Panasonic, Nikon? I don't know. I don't know. If there was a raw out option, I think that would be great. The only thing that I really want is I want the camera to either support Blackmagic or ProRes RAW, both. I'm kind of done with the Cinema DNG stuff. Cinema Raw Lite is great. It's relatively manageable, but it's proprietary. So we're not going to see that in the Fuji camera. So I would say I don't know the answer to that question. It would be really fantastic when it comes to their medium format cameras for sure. So let's see. Is making 10-bit videos for the internet worth it? Yes. At least recording in 10-bit because of the banding issues and everything else. And your image just breaks up more in post. So I would say if you have a choice in camera, you definitely want to be recording in 10-bit. Generally, if you're shooting in UHD 4K, or higher resolutions, I would say that the minimum bit rate that you want to record at is 200. And if your camera has higher bit rates for certain projects, then definitely go for that. What's up, Victor? Have I tried the S1H? I have not. You bought one instead of the Z Cam or Nikon. It's shockingly good. I started with the Sony A7S. It's a new day. Trevor, it is, exceptional what a lot of the companies are now doing. In fact, we know that the unicorn from Sony will surface at some point, but a lot has changed since even the A7 III. So we've got it good. The real conversation in some respects is how important is full frame? And You know, it's a tough one to really break that down because there's an obvious advantage to a what we call people are calling large format. Let's just call it full frame 35 millimeter cameras, which is that when you are confronted with and you're in a smaller physical space, then there's a huge advantage to that sensor size when it comes to its relationship with optics, because I can put a 1 millimeter lens on that camera and have a much wider field of view than if I put that same lens on a APS-C or Super 35 millimeter sensor-based camera system. So from that standpoint, that's a big advantage. As soon as you have depth and you have space, it becomes less significant. And historically, in the last, we'll just say, we want to say 20 years would be fine, 20 plus years. That Super 35 millimeter sensor size and all of the lenses in the film industry that are matched to that is and has been very, very popular in the industry. And there's a lot of people who have been shooting Super 35 for so long that when they're thinking about what they want to shoot and they're thinking about focal lengths, they're thinking in terms of that relationship between their lenses and that particular film or sensor size. And so when they're asking for a 40 millimeter lens, they're asking for it for the field of view and also, of course, the depth of field properties they're going to get from that focal length on Super 35. So when you move to full frame, there's definitely an adjustment to make. There's the advantage that when you're in smaller spaces, you have a greater field of view. But, you know, most importantly for somebody who's shooting is not just the composition and field of view, but it is those depth of field and also characteristics of the lens that are usually the most important. So the advantages and disadvantages are you have to understand what your depth of field situation is. This is even more prevalent when you start to go to micro four thirds because you have almost a 2-to-1 comparison in terms of field of view. So you're putting a 25 millimeter lens onto a micro four thirds camera. This is sans or without a speed booster. And you're getting effectively a 50 millimeter field of view, approximately. But your depth of field properties are a 25 millimeter lens for the most part. So those are things to really consider. Yes, I pronounced your name correctly. Okay. What boom mic do I use? Can you mention any good budget mics for filming music? Is Rode NTG good? Do you use Sound Blanket? Can it be done do it yourself? That's a lot of questions, Shovik. Boom mics that I use, basically, I use the NT55 a lot indoors. It's a cardioid pickup, though you can change the capsule and you can have it omnidirectional. And I like that because it has no tail. There's no pickup on the back of the actual mic. Currently, right here, I have the NTG5 for $499 US. It's tremendous value. And you definitely want to have Isotope RX in your kit for post, even if it's just the basic plugins for dialogue or voice denoise. The video mic NTG is a mic that I have now, but I have not tried. And it looks to be a really good mic, very versatile. It's definitely something to be considered. I love that NT55 inside because it has a high pass filter, and it is just for me, it's got attenuation. It can lower the incoming signal that's coming into the mic. It just happens to be a great small capsule mic that's very, very affordable. And once you get outside, that becomes a little bit different, and you might want to consider hyper or super cardioid as your pickup pattern. Moving blankets are in this space, not hugely effective. I need to put some up over here and over here, and I kind of have a false ceiling above me. So this space isn't fantastic acoustically. It's the space I have right now. And then once I build out the studio, obviously there will be a lot more soundproofing and sound treatment put into the space. But you can absolutely do it. If you were really, really budget conscious and you wanted an all-arounder, maybe the Rode Video Mic NTG. I just don't love it for all applications because it doesn't natively terminate in XLR, and I think that having a good XLR mic makes a lot of sense. So the other option would be maybe the NT55. There's a lot of great mics out there, but don't forget that, lavalier mics have a place, and they really do have a place in terms of what you're doing. I'm partial in terms of wireless systems right now to using the Sony UWP system, but not the mic that it comes with, and then swapping that out with a Sanken or, some other Tram or some other manufacturers. And really, if you really want to learn audio, there's some great resources out there. Dean Miles, check out his books and his video series, amazing. And then Curtis Judd, of course, if you haven't heard of him, he's a guru and really fantastic human being, but also just sharing amazing knowledge having to do with audio and audio recording. So let's see. For small corporate jobs, do you use powered or anything for shine control on talent skin? Powder. I don't want the autofocus to go crazy. Mac Group makes something that is about $20, $25 a tube. You take T-squares and you, not T-squares, yeah, wedges, and you apply it. And it's an anti-shine gel that mattes, and I find that to be one of the most effective things that I've ever used. I also use rice powder, and then it's really then split in the male-female category. If I can't bring in a makeup artist, then I've always got rice powder, and I've got that MAC product with me, Matafiante or something. It's some French name. And then usually you want to just have something that can sort of lift the lips a little bit, but not with any sparkles and things like that. And then when you're speaking to female talent, you might ask them to just put on a basic base, and then you can talk to them about their makeup when you get there or when they get there. Simple is best. You always start with just extremely simple, and then if you need to go further, you can. Because you don't know how that person does makeup, you want to start with them arriving comfortable with the way their face is, but you don't want them to have they've done a full lip and all of that kind of stuff. And you have to figure that out. And sometimes, their tear sheets and things like that can give you a sense of that anyway. So if you see something that's like a red flag, like they like to go pretty extreme on their makeup, make sure you have that conversation with them ahead of time. Men in general, it's really just sort of taking down the shine and stuff like that. Having a little spray bottle with you to just take away the flyaways for both male and female talent. Let's see. Boom. We got some conversation. David. Okay. So David says, Alex Knickerbocker. I used to eat Knickerbocker glories up in Scotland. That was when I was a kid. Is a new audio guy on YouTube. That's fantastic too. Good. If you want, you can find us under PG Herne. Just be aware it's all in German. English is coming up next year. Okay, cool. Are you using a light meter and color meter on your sets, or have tools like false color replace that for you? Nicholas, I still use meters. Waveform monitor is probably the most used tool in terms of just judging where my exposure is in general. What I'll do is wherever subject matter is, I'll walk in a 18% gray card. And if I'm shooting in log, I'm usually trying to sit at 40 to 45 in terms of where that's exposed. Now, obviously, where you point that gray card is totally dependent on the type of lighting you have. So if you're going to be lighting beauty, clamshell coming from camera, or even Rembrandt-ish, pointing that gray card to or just off of camera is probably going to give you the direction that that gray card should be going in. If you're side keying more, then you kind of have to split the difference and you have to go in between. I like to rotate that gray card all the way to the key, then go back to camera, find that sort of middle spot, and that's usually where I'm finding that exposure. On the base level, though nowhere near as comprehensive as a C800 and nowhere near, I would say, as accurate, the Lumu Power 2, which attaches to an iOS device, is great for an incident and a color meter. It'll definitely get you really close to where you need to be in the ballpark. The advantage for light meters in general, for me, and you know, as you go on, maybe your eye just gets better. The light meter is really great for lighting ratios because you're not going to get that from a luminance waveform monitor on a scope because it shows you no depth. It's just showing you luminance values. Same with a histogram. There's no depth information there. So if you're shooting talent at a 2.8, and you want your background to be 2 stops darker, then you can light that meter to 2 stops. You can light with a meter 2 stops darker on the background or 2 stops brighter. So it depends on how you're doing that and what you want to do. And it can be confusing because if you want to get correct exposure on a background, and you're talent at 2.8 and you're reading a 1.4 on the background, that's actually your 2 stops, right? It's just telling you that in order to get correct exposure, you should open up to a 1.4, but that's not what you do. You light talent at 2.8, set your camera and your lens to 2.8, and then you are lighting your background at a 1.4, and you'll have a 2-stop difference, and it'll be 4 times as dark. Okay, good. What do we got here? I see some chatter. I like that. The elephant in the room. The new Mac Pro is amazing, but just how overpriced. Probably overpriced. Would I buy it? What's up, Tommy? Look, I'm a laptop person. I'm in a 2016 MacBook Pro right now. I'm paying for college and hopefully the studio. As part of this, when this is around and ready, this will get replaced with probably the newer 16-inch MacBook Pro, whichever one is there at that time, and it will be the highest end one I can get, save for the SSD memory. But I'll put the best graphics card in there that I can. I'll put the most RAM that I can in there, and I'll probably put a 2 terabyte SSD as opposed to a 1 terabyte. I don't know about the guru thing, but I appreciate that. Cool. So for your YouTube setup, do you take it apart and set it up every time you do a video? Do you leave it all the equipment camera set up constantly? Lakovos. Well, it depends. It depends on what production I have happening here. For the most part, this is a standing set here, so I can swap out the background and things like that. It's a bitch right now because it's not an insulated space, so I've got space heaters and I do certain things to make it possible to do production in here. But this space will eventually get built out, and it'll be about an 1,100 square foot open space, probably with at least an infinity wall, a corner cyc if I can pull it off. But the cameras are sort of living here on a pretty regular basis. They sometimes just all get moved and then come back to here, but this particular table usually stays where it is. That's what I'm doing. So there you go. Any tips when filming folk wearing glasses regarding reflections? Does a circular polarizing filter work? It can help subvids. Glasses are just such a moving target, especially nowadays. And the big problem is the coatings, blue, green. Some people are partial to saying blue. I actually prefer green, though I guess you could think that somebody is being lit by a green screen. I just think that the blue is so distracting in, in the frame. One of the biggest things you can do, but it obviously has a dramatic effect on your style of lighting, is you can side key and side fill when people are wearing glasses. And if you have big enough sources and they're really soft, it can be really beautiful. For bald people, you've got to have something above them, which basically is going to bounce some of that light back onto them. But I would say that side keying is a good place to start. And if it's not something that you do on a regular basis, push a light through or bounce a light off of a 4x4 piece of foam core, or ideally compressed styrofoam, which we call beadboard, and then bring in a large white reflector on the other side. It's kind of like you're making an ice cream sandwich. Let's just call it. It's the ice cream sandwich lighting technique, and it can really help you with those types of situations. Is the iMac Pro a good compromise between MacBook Pro and Mac Pro? Yes, but it's not part of my workflow. But just specs wise and what's in there, I'd say it is a good compromise. I travel so much that I really have to go the route of a laptop, and I can't have multiple computers everywhere. The money's not there. So any recommendations for a color accurate editing monitor under $500? I'm not coughing because that's a ridiculous question, Baron. I'm coughing because I need to have some water. Hold on. I don't know the state of the monitors right now. The two companies that are probably making monitors that are, hold on. Holy mother. I can mute. Can I? That's the A10 Mini. I think it worked. I think I was able to mute. Let me know if the audio dropped temporarily when I coughed or cleared my throat, and then if it came back. Hopefully. Hold on. Okay, I got three questions now. So Baron, back to you. So Dell and Benro are probably the two to look into. I've heard really good things about the Benro monitors. Color accurate is a tough one. They do come calibrated, with usually some sort of form. You can get a puck and you can calibrate them as well. I just do some research and let me know what you find out. So there you go. Sorry, that wasn't probably a great answer. Tommy's asking, what's my favorite RGB WW panel light that's currently available? That's a tough question. I mean, I am, for the money, really liking the Mix Panel 150 from Nanlite. It's about $1,100. It's bigger than the 1x1. And I like the fact that it has kind of this soft diffusion setting that you can switch between. And I like what I'm getting out of that light for the price that it's coming in at. I'm excited about what Nova is going to be coming from Aputure. And then in terms of the small ones, I'm still really kind of digging the Luxli stuff in the small form factor. And I've got to say that little MC is a rock star. Like Caleb, I wish and hope and pray that they come out with, pray is a strong word, but I really hope that they come out with a slightly larger version of the MC. He'd like something that's more F7 size. I think that I'd go from this to maybe this would be, pardon me, great. So something more like the Luxli Cello, and that's what I'd be digging. And I'm looking forward to, Tommy, some of your stuff that you're going to be doing on content related to that. What do we got here? Thoughts on stepping outside your box? Small market. I make my money as a sound mixer for national level jobs and as a commercial photographer. I want to try more video without stepping on toes. Well, Travis, stepping on toes is kind of an odd thing because are you saying with the people that you're already working with? Well, that makes sense. But you definitely don't want to go after the same clients that you're getting other types of work with other people. But if there's certain markets that you identify with and you think you would enjoy creating content in, then those are the markets that I would go after initially. You know, one of the first things that you bring to the table is your experience with sound and as a sound mixer. And so, you know, you don't want to say I'm a sound mixer that's now a DP, but you know, the quality of your sound and what you're going to do is definitely maybe something that can set you apart. I just really go after the types of work that you want to do. And there's nothing wrong, especially if you're not me, you know, married, 3 kids. If you've got some friends that you can get together with and do some spec type work along the lines of the type of work that you'd like to do, then a weekend here and there with some, you know, blood, sweat, and tears into some editing could really do well. I'm assuming as a sound mixer that you could probably do some pretty cool stuff with sound design and post. Not everybody who's a sound mixer can, but you probably have some skills there. So I put together 2 or 3 short pieces that are related to the industries you're interested in and just sound design the F out of those things and just make them look good. Female powered MC, and I'm on board. Ben Rowe will make the first monopod monitor. That's pretty funny. Yeah, Ben Q. Yes, you're right. Oh, for God's sake. Did I say Ben Rowe? Let's pause, hit rewind, and go back in time about 3 to 5 minutes. And when I'm making those monitor recommendations to look into, those would be Dell and BenQ. Thank you very much. It's always good to have a correction system in place here. I was miming. That means the audio did drop. Thank you very much for that, subvids. If I calibrate my editing monitor or my SMALLHD monitor, can I trust my camera's monitor for exposure and color? Probably not, Josh. I mean, it's all over the place right now. You're trying your best, but, you know, probably not. Nicholas says, in a recent video, you said you were getting tired of soft light. What kind of setups have you been trying? That's great. That's probably one of the best questions I've had in a while. So I'm getting tired because it's just what I'm and most people are using. And I've really been waiting for fixtures to come to market that are bringing hard light options back to us in a bigger way. And I don't mean hard light like taking a 1x1 LED and using it without any diffusion. I just mean controllable, you know, cuttable hard light sources. So the fact that we're getting Fresnels and we're getting, you know, spotlight, you know, Lico style attachments and things like that that are becoming options for the lights that we're using is fantastic. I'm excited about fixtures like the 300X from APUTURE because I really want to see us moving with forward with chip on board lights that are giving us bicolor. I don't need RGB on those fixtures, but I really want to have the ability to go from, you know, around 3,000 Kelvin up to 7,500 to 10,000 Kelvin. That's a really great range. If I have to have a sweet spot, it's going to be 3,000 to 6,000 Kelvin. But ideally at least 6,500 Kelvin. And I'm going to get into the hard light part a little bit more, but 6,500 Kelvin, because that's the native white point of a lot of displays. So when you have displays in your shots and you're using them and they're part of what you're doing, it can make a lot of sense to actually set your lights and also your cameras to match that white point, which would be 6,500 Kelvin. So, you know, that's just something to be considered. I'm just doing setups, Nicholas, where I'm using those harder fixtures to cut a little bit more. I'm also doing a lot right now with the LightBridge Cine Reflect lighting system, which is a series of reflectors that come in different diffusion values. And some of them are really soft. They come in, they name them as black, blue, violet, and white. That's just a naming convention for the 4 different types of diffusion. And black is the most mirror-like, and then moving all the way up to white, which is closest to, let's say, beadboard. And these reflectors come in different sizes. And you bounce relatively hard light, lens light, Fresnels, and things like that onto these. There's a light also called the compact beam light from BB&S, which is great. And you push them into these reflectors, and then you start to shape your light and push them into different places. And I've been finding that while I thought that I would be drawn more towards the white, softer reflectors because they'd just be softer, that I'm really enjoying using the blues and the violets that are giving me still a soft, natural quality, but I'm able to replicate different types of lighting, or qualities of light is a better way to say that. So I think I'm going to have some of that coming up in my NAB workshop, and we'll definitely be playing with soft and hard light, and more than just having a kicker. So it's just, it's been, except for creating specials, which are just sort of like, pools of light on specific objects or things. I have not until sort of recently been bringing back and playing with hard light as much. And of course that was very prevalent before. So when we were using ARRI Fresnel kits and Lowell Omni and Pro lights and things like that. So yeah, that's, it's great. And Trevor's talking about, there's 2 things that you really want to be looking for to create depth besides what you're doing camera wise, when you're talking about lighting. And one of them is pools of light, and the other one is just creating depth with having light and different, it's kind of pools of light, but think about the background and, having practicals or things that could play as practicals, and then the different color temperatures you're using to create depth and interest in the background. So there you go. What else we got here? What we got? Yo, Jim. What's up, Guillermo? I haven't used any of the GVM video lights, so I have no thoughts on them. We're going to get more into CRI, TLCI, SSI, and things like that in the future. I'm kind of in a new personal education phase where I'm learning more and more about the qualities of what's happening with light fixtures, but also how we use different fixtures from different manufacturers effectively in production. And that's where things like the C800 meter from Sekonic come into play in a big way. So we'll see how that all goes. I have seen the kits, Josh, that convert ARRI 650s and the 300s and the 150s to LED. I think it's a 300, not a 350. They're pretty cool, and you obviously get to use your housing and your lensing from the original ARRI. Haven't seen a lot of it recently, especially because we're starting to see these Fresnel attachments for the COB or chip on board LEDs, and those are becoming a big thing now. But yeah, so what is this? Shovik is saying, oh, Gerald, it's a question for Gerald. Okay. I think it's for Gerald. What do we got for other questions? We're 7 minutes. It goes fast. And there's a nice amount of people here. We've had some real conversations. What else do we have? Is monitor calibration the same for stills and video, or is there a difference? There is some difference. I mean, technically what you're trying to do is tune your monitor to be correct at different color values. But it seems to be that there are some solutions and pucks that are very specific to a particular industry. Best place to look is X-Rite. Honestly, it's not an area that I put a lot of focus on. It's important for me to have consistent color, but it's not a huge part of my workflow. I'm hoping that with some of these, I mean, I calibrate the SMALLHD monitors and stuff, but I hope that with these new monitors that are going to be coming from SMALLHD and also ATOMOS, like the Neon, that there's going to be a calibration process for that, because when you start to get into HDR and now you're talking about bigger gamuts and all of this stuff, it's important. Wow, Victor, come on, that's a crazy question. What piece of equipment do you like to have that gives the biggest impact on how you shoot? It's for sure lighting related, and if it's how I shoot, because obviously sound is so important. But I would say it's lighting. But more so than that, it's lighting control. So white bounce and black neg are probably the two things that they're probably the most important things for me that have the most impact. Shovik is asking budget RGB video light with high CRI, low heat, noise. What form factor? I definitely check that Nanlite Mix Panel 150 out. If you want RGB at the moment in a larger form factor, you know, so much of that has to do with budget. I mean, that Titan X2 from Rhodolite looks amazing, but it's going to be too expensive for some people. Okay. CES was quiet this year, Trevor. Let's see what we got. Alex is asking, do you find that running a YouTube channel has improved your business? In other words, is the time investment worthwhile? Again, a great question. I think for the type of content that I generally produce, and there's a lot of content that I do that is so outside of this industry, I just don't talk about it much, except for I did a corporate job for this and that and blah, blah, blah. Yes. And I've done this for a long time where I've created video content, not on YouTube, and then stopped and then come back and created consistent content. And I find that my connection to this industry and the work that I get is definitely impacted by me having a consistent voice in the industry. Now, you look at my numbers, they're abysmal. Subscribe, please. Compared to some people. And part of that is just time. Part of it is the type of content that you're creating. And, you know, for this channel in particular, a lot of what I try to focus on is nuts and bolts. You know, I'm the person who's like, here's how you're going to use this, as opposed to spending a lot of time on the flashiness of stuff. So I wouldn't say that the content that I create on a regular basis is entertaining content, but the goal is to provide a platform where people can go to not only get answers to real questions that they have having to do with their production, but hopefully as time goes on, increase the quality and the depth of the educational content pertaining to learning the craft of video production. I think that, you know, my lane is small to no crew, which is for a lot of people their lane. And the beautiful thing is that there's lots of voices who have their own stuff. I have definite big ideas for where the content goes here. And not all of that content will just be free content on YouTube. You know, you're trying to make a living, but I think that that's basically my answer to that question. The answer is yes, Alex, it is important and is something that's improved my business in this space, but we'll just see how it all goes. Best tip to expose correctly with the Ninja 5 using EOS R. Depends on how you have your EOS R set up. Generally, for me, it's using a waveform monitor and an 18% middle gray card, and it should be somewhere between 40 and 50 IRE. You don't want to clip your highlights. If you're shooting with a Rec 709 gamma, then closer to 50. If you're in a log gamma, then you probably want to sit closer to 40. So there you go. So not a lot of time. I'll see if I can get into, wow, big question. Can you tell how to structure educational videos? I like very much your idea of marketing by educational videos. That's a big question. Probably too much for this particular live stream, especially because we're a minute or two from finishing up. A lot of it is just figuring out who the voice should be that is going to communicate what it is that that company does. You're trying to portray expertise in your various field of knowledge, whatever that is, financial, hospitality, tech, whatever it is. And the voice has to be somebody who is not an actor, not a model, but somebody who actually can help educate the viewer in terms